My name is Madison Clark, I'm 37 years old, and I thought I had finally reached the night my family would look at me and see more than the quiet, invisible daughter. I had spent years carving a life out of nothing in Chicago, building my career in tech, staying up through endless nights of coding, risking everything on an idea that most people laughed at, and somehow I made it. I sold my startup for millions. I bought a condo overlooking Lake Michigan. Strangers in the industry shook my hand, invited me to speak at conferences, even printed my name in Forbes. Yet in my family's eyes, none of it ever mattered. That's why I planned that dinner. I wanted to create a moment no one could ignore, something so generous and extravagant that they would finally see me differently. I reserved a corner table at one of the most expensive steakhouses in Chicago, the kind of place where the silverware gleamed under soft candlelight and every waiter moved like they were performing on a stage. I made sure the timing was perfect, that the view of the city skyline sparkled behind us, that the wine list would impress even my father's critical taste. I didn't just want to treat them to dinner. I wanted to give them a gift that screamed, "I matter." That night, hidden inside envelopes waiting in my purse, were first-class tickets to Maui. Not economy. Not business. First class. A whole vacation planned down to the last detail, from the resort on the beach to the spa appointments. It cost me more than most people make in a year, but I didn't care. I thought it would finally buy me something that felt impossible: respect. When we sat down, the atmosphere felt almost ordinary. My sister Kendra, 3 years older, glowing as always, launched into stories about her latest marketing campaign, tossing around industry jargon that made my father beam with pride. He leaned forward, soaking up every word. My mother smiled faintly, nodding like she always did, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I sat there quietly, my heart racing, waiting for my turn. When the waiter placed the steaks on the table, I took a breath and pulled the envelopes from my bag. "I actually have a surprise for you all," I said, sliding them across the white tablecloth. Kendra grabbed hers first, tearing it open with curiosity. Her eyes flicked across the ticket inside. For the smallest second, I thought I saw surprise, maybe even gratitude. But then her lips curved into a smirk I knew too well. "You're still trying to buy our love, aren't you?" she said, her voice cutting through the low hum of the restaurant, sharp enough for the table beside us to hear. My father leaned back, letting out a low chuckle, and then delivered the words that nearly split me in half. "No one here actually likes you, Madison." It was like the entire room went silent. I swear the clinking of glasses, the background jazz, even the sound of plates being carried, everything faded into nothing. People at nearby tables turned. A waitress froze mid-step, her tray wobbling in her hands. And my mother, she didn't say a word. She just stared at her plate, twisting her napkin, her silence heavier than anything my father or sister could have said. I forced myself to hold still. My fingers trembled beneath the table, but I raised my chin, managed the faintest smile, and whispered, "Understood." I pushed my chair back, the scrape of it echoing like thunder, and I stood. Every pair of eyes in that restaurant seemed to follow me as I walked out, their laughter trailing behind me like smoke I couldn't escape. In the parking lot, the winter air slapped against my face. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from Kendra lit up the screen. "Good luck buying respect." I stared at those words until they blurred, my chest tight, my stomach twisting. And then, right there in the dark, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. In that moment, I finally understood, they would never respect me. Not willingly. Not freely. Not no matter how much money I spent or how many achievements I stacked. But there was another way. If they wouldn't give me respect, I would make them regret ever underestimating me. I turned toward the street, the glow of the city stretching out before me, and I made a decision that would change everything. The house. The so-called Clark family legacy. The one thing they had always worshipped, the thing they believed would forever be theirs. What they didn't realize was that it legally belonged to me. That would be my first move. The morning after that dinner I barely slept. I sat in my condo, staring at the gray Chicago skyline, my untouched coffee turning cold in front of me. Their words still echoed in my head like broken glass. No one here actually likes you. You're still trying to buy our love. And worse than all of that was my mother, sitting there silent, twisting her napkin while I drowned alone. That silence hurt more than anything they said. It was confirmation of what I had always known: she would never stand up for me. I looked at the envelopes on my kitchen counter, the expensive first-class tickets that now felt like scraps of paper. My chest tightened as anger replaced the shame. That was the night I finally understood. I could never win their love. But I could make them regret. So I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. My voice didn't even shake when I said, "Sell the house." There was a pause on the other end. "You mean the Evanston property? Your grandfather's place?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Sell it as fast as you can." It wasn't just a house. It was the Clark family shrine. The gray colonial where my father delivered speeches about legacy, where Christmas photos were taken, where Kendra stood front and center every year smiling like she owned the place. But what they never talked about was the will. When my grandfather passed, he left the house to me, and only me. Maybe he saw how invisible I was to them. Maybe he wanted me to have something they couldn't strip away. By the end of the week, the deal was closed. A developer paid over $2 million in cash. The locks were changed. The house, their precious symbol of pride, was gone. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight shift. It didn't take long for the phone calls to start. My father's voice roared through the speaker, calling me selfish, calling me a traitor to the family. I hung up. Minutes later, a text from Kendra popped up: "You disgust me. How dare you?" I deleted it without replying. For once, their rage didn't crush me. It energized me. But then something unexpected happened. 2 days later there was a knock on my door. I opened it to see my mother, wrapped in her heavy winter coat, her face pale and tight. She stepped inside, her hands clutching her purse. She didn't sit for long. She didn't yell. She just looked at me with tired eyes and said softly, "We're hurt, Madison. Why didn't you talk to us first?" For a moment I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask where she was at that dinner, why she sat silent while Dad humiliated me. But all I could do was stare back at her. She gave me nothing more, no apology, no warmth, no hint of pride. After a few minutes she sighed, stood, and walked out. And just like always, she left me alone. Later that night I met Eric at a cafe by the river. He was the one person who had always believed in me, who had been by my side during the years I nearly broke from overwork and exhaustion. I told him everything: the dinner, the house, my mother showing up. He listened quietly, his hands wrapped around his mug. When I finished, he leaned closer. "You've been carrying them for years," he said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The trust. The family fund. You've been pouring money into it since you sold your company. Tuition for Kendra's kids, your parents' medical bills, their mortgage. That money came from you." I nodded slowly. It was true. I had thought of it as doing the right thing, believing generosity might finally earn me their respect. Eric's jaw tightened. "It's time to cut them off. They don't deserve it." His words were sharp, but they sank in. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "Have you checked the trust lately? I've heard things. Kendra's been spending big, new car, trips, things that don't add up. It's worth looking into." The thought made my stomach churn. Kendra had always been reckless, but the idea that she might be stealing from money I set aside for the whole family, it wasn't impossible. In fact, it sounded exactly like her. Eric offered to look into it, and a part of me wanted to refuse, to keep pretending I didn't care. But deep down, I needed to know. So I nodded. Find out. 2 weeks later, he called me to his apartment. His laptop glowed on the table, filled with spreadsheets and records. His face was grim. "You need to see this," he said. I leaned over and stared at the screen. Line after line of transactions funneled directly to Kendra. $500,000, siphoned out of the trust into her own accounts. Eric's voice was steady. She poured it into some flashy startup pitch at her firm. It collapsed in months. The money is gone. I felt the air leave my lungs. $500,000. Money that was supposed to be for the family, for emergencies, for stability. She had gambled it all away without even asking me. "She thought you'd never notice," Eric said quietly. "She thought you'd stay quiet. Like always." I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. The betrayal was sharp, but it wasn't surprising. It was Kendra. It was always Kendra. The next morning I called my lawyer again. My voice was calm. "Transfer the trust. Every cent that's left. Move it all to charity. Somewhere it will actually matter." Within a week, nearly $1 million was gone from their reach and donated to a foundation supporting foster children in Illinois. Kids who reminded me of myself, overlooked, underestimated, invisible. I didn't tell my family. I didn't need to. They found out soon enough. The begging calls started. The angry texts. The accusations that I was heartless, cruel, selfish. I ignored them all. For the first time in my life, I felt free. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming myself. But I didn't realize yet that cutting them off was only the beginning. The money Kendra stole was about to come to light in ways none of us could have predicted. And when it did, her perfect little empire would start to crumble. When the first call came from Kendra, I didn't pick up. Her name flashed across my phone again and again, sometimes with texts in all caps, sometimes with long, venomous paragraphs about how I had ruined the family. I ignored them. But then one evening, as I was walking back from the office, a notification buzzed that stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't a message from her. It was a headline. "Marketing executive under fire for misuse of family funds." I froze on the sidewalk as people rushed past me, the wind whipping off Lake Michigan, my breath clouding in the cold. I clicked the article. There she was, Kendra Clark, smiling in a glossy corporate headshot, the same smirk she had thrown at me across the dinner table. The article detailed how an anonymous source had revealed her siphoning $500,000 from a family trust into a failed startup project. The numbers matched exactly what Eric had shown me. My heart pounded as I read. It didn't mention me by name, but it didn't need to. The trust was registered under the Clark family. Her firm was suddenly questioning her integrity. Colleagues who once praised her were whispering. The golden child's halo was slipping. By the next morning, the calls weren't just angry. They were desperate. Dad left a voicemail in a shaky voice, demanding I tell the press it wasn't true, that it was a misunderstanding. Kendra texted me paragraphs begging me to help her, saying I was the only one who could fix this. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, reading every word slowly. Then I set the phone down and walked away. For years, I had begged for scraps of their approval. For years, I had been the one ignored, dismissed, treated like I didn't belong. And now, suddenly, I was the one with the power. But instead of satisfaction, I felt something else. A hollow ache. Watching Kendra unravel didn't bring me joy. It just proved what I had known all along, that the pedestal she stood on was made of sand. Still, the storm around her only grew. At her firm, projects were taken away from her. Clients she once bragged about cut ties. Her boss issued a statement that sounded polite on the surface but read like a death sentence for her career. And when her name finally hit the evening news, paired with the word embezzlement, she called me in tears. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," she sobbed. "Please, Madison, help me. Just tell them you approved it. Tell them you knew." I held the phone to my ear, listening to her broken voice. For a second, I almost remembered the sister I used to chase around the yard, the girl who once held my hand on the first day of school. But then I remembered the smirk in the steakhouse, the way she laughed when Dad told me no one liked me, the way she had stolen not just money but years of my dignity. "No, Kendra," I said quietly. "This time, you're on your own." And I hung up. Days later, my parents showed up at my condo without warning. My father's face was red, his voice booming before I even opened the door fully. "You ruined this family," he shouted. "You've destroyed your sister's life, your mother's peace, everything your grandfather built." I stood there in the doorway, calm, my hand resting lightly on the frame. "No, Dad," I said. "Kendra did that herself." His face twisted with fury, but I didn't move, didn't flinch. My mother's eyes, tired and watery, searched mine, but she said nothing. Just like always. They left eventually, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame, but I didn't chase after them. I didn't beg. I didn't care. Still, the weight of it pressed on me at night. Lying in bed beside Eric, staring at the ceiling, I confessed what I hadn't admitted to anyone. "It doesn't feel good," I whispered. "Watching her fall. I thought it would, but it doesn't." Eric pulled me close, his hand warm against my back. "That's because you're not like them. You don't want revenge, Madison. You just wanted to be seen." His words sank deep. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if all of this wasn't just about hurting them, but about freeing myself. But the chaos wasn't over. Because the investigation into Kendra's spending didn't stop with the trust. Reporters started digging into her firm's accounts, her projects, even her personal finances. And soon, the whispers turned into headlines. Words like fraud and criminal charges began to appear next to her name. The night I saw her face on the news, pale and tight, rushing into a courthouse with cameras flashing, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just her downfall. It was the implosion of the Clark family's image. And my parents, desperate to protect what was left, were about to do something drastic. I just didn't know yet how far they were willing to go. I should have known they wouldn't just let Kendra sink on her own. My father had built his entire life around control, controlling his image, his family, his story. And now that story was unraveling in front of the entire city. He wasn't about to stand by and let his golden daughter take the blame without trying to drag me down with her. It started with a knock on my door one Saturday morning. When I opened it, 2 men in suits were standing there. Their voices were polite, but their words made my stomach twist. They were investigators, and they wanted to ask me questions about the trust. I invited them in, my hands steady even though my heart was pounding. They asked if I had known about Kendra's transfers, if I had given permission. I told them the truth. No. I never approved a cent of it. I showed them the paperwork, the emails, the records proving I had redirected the remaining money to charity. They nodded, took notes, thanked me for my time. But when they left, I knew exactly who had sent them my way. My father. That evening he called me. His voice was cold, every word dripping with accusation. "You've embarrassed us. You've embarrassed your sister. Do you realize what people are saying about this family? Do you realize what you've done?" I bit back the urge to laugh. "What I've done? Dad, Kendra stole from me. She stole from all of us. And you're blaming me? His response was sharp enough to make my hand shake as I held the phone. If you don't fix this, Madison, you'll regret it. We can make life very difficult for you. For a moment, I almost hung up. But instead, I said the thing I had been holding back for years. You've already made my life difficult. Every day of it. I'm done being your scapegoat. Then I ended the call. Eric told me to let it go, to block their numbers, to live my life without them. But I couldn't. Not when I felt the storm building. My parents weren't just angry, they were desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. Within a week, my name appeared in whispers online. Anonymous comments, rumors that I had forced Kendra into making the transfers, that I had used the charity donation as a cover-up, that I was jealous of her success and wanted to ruin her. I recognized the language. It was my father's voice, filtered through the mouths of others. One night, as I scrolled through the hateful messages, I got a call from a journalist. She asked if I wanted to make a statement, to clear the air. My throat went dry. What are they saying now? I asked. They're saying you manipulated the trust to set your sister up. That this was all a scheme for attention. I hung up without answering. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. For years, I had lived invisible in their shadow, and now, suddenly, I was being painted as the villain. It was almost funny. Almost. But the worst came when I received a letter. Official. Legal. My parents and Kendra were suing me. They claimed I had mismanaged the trust, that the sale of the house was done out of spite, that I had sabotaged the family for personal gain. Reading the words, I felt the ground shift beneath me. They weren't just trying to smear me in the press, they were coming for me in court. I sat at my dining table, the letter trembling in my hands, when Eric walked in. He took one look at me, read the papers, and his jaw tightened. They're trying to bury you, he said. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. They always wanted me invisible. Now they want me destroyed. Eric placed his hands on my shoulders, steady and firm. Then you fight. You've been surviving them your whole life, Madison. Maybe it's time you stop surviving and start winning. The words lit something in me. A fire I thought had burned out years ago. I wiped my face, straightened my back, and nodded. Then let's fight. The following weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers, digging up records, preparing for battle. Every headline about Kendra's case now had my name somewhere in the margins. The Clark family drama was front-page news, and I was no longer just the invisible daughter, I was the supposed mastermind behind a scandal. But I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to let them twist it anymore. One night, while combing through old files with Eric, I stumbled on something I hadn't expected to find. Buried in years of trust records was a transaction not tied to Kendra but to my father. Tens of thousands quietly funneled to a shell account. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. More transfers. Hidden, disguised, spread over years. Eric leaned over my shoulder, his eyes narrowing. This isn't just about Kendra. Your dad's been dipping in, too. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. The man who spent years telling me I was nothing, who told me no one liked me, who demanded loyalty while giving me none, he had been stealing too. In that moment, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just a fight against my sister. This was a fight against all of them. And if the courts didn't destroy them, the truth I now held in my hands would. The discovery of my father's hidden transactions sat heavy in my chest like a stone. For years, I had believed Kendra was the golden child and my father was the iron hand holding the family together, righteous and unshakable. But staring at the records on my laptop, the truth glared back at me. He had been stealing too. Not just once, not just a mistake, but over and over, funneling money into accounts that had nothing to do with family needs. Vacations. Investments. Luxury goods. Quiet payments that painted a story he'd never admit out loud. The next morning, I took the files to my lawyer. She scanned the pages, her eyebrows arching higher with every click. "This changes everything," she said. "If this goes to court, it won't just be about you defending yourself. It will be about exposing them." The thought made me dizzy. For so long, I had carried the weight of being the scapegoat, the one they mocked, dismissed, silenced. Now I held the power to flip the story completely. I could turn their accusations into their downfall. But a part of me hesitated. As much as I despised them, they were still my family. My mother's face flashed in my mind, her tired eyes, her silence. Would she survive the shame if the truth about my father came out? Did I even care anymore? Eric broke through my thoughts. "Madison, they've already declared war on you. They're suing you, dragging your name through the mud, trying to destroy everything you built. You don't owe them silence. You owe yourself freedom." I looked at him, the man who had stood by me through every humiliation, every betrayal. He was right. Silence had never saved me. Maybe truth could. The trial date came faster than I expected. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, microphones shoved into my face, cameras flashing. "Madison, did you sabotage your sister? Did you steal from the trust? What do you say to the accusations?" I pushed through, my lawyer shielding me, my chin high even though my heart hammered in my chest. Inside, the air was thick with tension. My parents sat on one side, Kendra beside them, her once perfect posture slumped, her eyes red-rimmed. My father glared at me with the same look he had used my entire life, the one that said I was less, I was wrong, I was nothing. But this time, I wasn't the one on trial. Not really. When my lawyer presented the evidence, the room shifted. The numbers didn't lie. Transfer after transfer, account after account, every dollar traced back to Kendra and then, shockingly, to my father. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. My father's face turned crimson, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Kendra's head snapped toward him, her expression twisting in horror. For once, her smirk was gone. She realized she wasn't alone in this scandal. She wasn't just the golden child who had fallen. She was part of a family empire rotting from the inside. My mother sat frozen, her hands clasped in her lap, her lips pressed together. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. She just stared straight ahead as if she could will herself invisible. The judge's gavel pounded, calling the room to order, but the damage was done. The image of the Clark family, perfect, polished, untouchable, was shattered. And I was the one holding the hammer. When the session ended, reporters rushed toward me again. "Madison, how long have you known about your father's involvement? Do you feel vindicated?" I didn't answer. I just walked through the flashing cameras, my lawyer and Eric on either side of me. My silence was louder than anything I could have said. That night, the phone calls started again. Not angry this time. Desperate. My father's voice, hoarse and broken, left on my voicemail, "Madison, you don't understand what you've done. You're tearing this family apart. We can fix this. Just stop. Please." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small listening to his words. I didn't feel guilty. I felt powerful. Because the truth was, they had torn this family apart long before I ever spoke. I had just stopped cleaning up their mess in silence. But even as I sat in my condo, the city lights flickering beyond the glass, I knew it wasn't over. People like my father didn't surrender easily. He had built his life on control, and now that control was slipping through his fingers. The lawsuit wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of whatever he was planning next. I lay awake beside Eric that night, staring into the dark, my mind racing. For the first time in years, I felt the possibility of freedom, of living without their shadow pressing down on me. But freedom came with a price. And I could feel it looming, heavy and sharp, waiting for me just beyond the horizon. And I was right. Because within days, I learned my father wasn't going to let the truth destroy him quietly. He was about to strike back in a way that would drag me into the fire with them. I should have known my father wouldn't go down without dragging me into the flames. A man like him, so used to power, so obsessed with control, would rather burn the house down than admit he'd lost it. And within a week of the courtroom revelation, I saw exactly how far he was willing to go. The first sign came in the form of another headline. This one had my name. Tech entrepreneur accused of family betrayal. The article painted me as a calculating villain, a bitter daughter who sold the family home out of spite, drained the trust, and framed her sister and father to elevate herself. The quotes were all anonymous, but the voice was unmistakable. It was my father's, twisted through the mouths of friends, colleagues, people who owed him favors. At first I thought I could ignore it. I had survived worse. But then the fallout reached my world outside the family. An investor pulled out of a project I'd been building. A speaking engagement was suddenly cancelled. Emails from colleagues turned cold, clipped, cautious. My father's smear campaign was working. He couldn't win in court, so he was trying to destroy me in the only way he knew how, by poisoning the air around me. One night, I sat at the dining table with Eric, my laptop glowing between us, reading comment after comment calling me a monster, a liar, a fraud. My throat burned, my eyes stung, but I refused to cry. Eric reached across the table, took my hand, and said quietly, "They can only win if you give up." His words steadied me. I thought back to that dinner, to my sister's smirk, my father's laugh, my mother's silence. All those years of being invisible, begging for scraps of respect. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was standing in the light now, even if it burned. The next court session arrived, and this time the stakes were higher. My father's lawyer tried to paint me as manipulative, waving papers and twisting timelines to suggest I had orchestrated everything. I sat there, calm, letting them spin their lies. And then my lawyer stood, holding the documents we'd uncovered, each one tracing my father's thefts with precision. Transaction after transaction, date after date. The truth laid bare. The courtroom was silent except for the judge's gavel when the evidence was admitted. My father's face turned ashen. Kendra buried her face in her hands. My mother sat still, her lips trembling, but no words came. For once, the silence didn't hurt me. It freed me. The judge dismissed their claims against me. The lawsuit collapsed under the weight of their own corruption. I walked out of that courthouse not just vindicated but untouchable. The reporters swarmed me again, microphones in my face, but this time I smiled. The truth speaks for itself, I said, and kept walking. But freedom didn't feel like victory. That night, when I returned home, I sat by the window and looked out at the city lights, thinking about everything that had been lost. My family name was in ruins. My sister's career was finished. My father's reputation was shattered. My mother, she was still silent. Always silent. And me? I had won, but the victory was hollow. Because the truth was, I had never wanted their destruction. I had only ever wanted their love. Eric poured me a glass of wine, sat beside me, and said softly, "You can't change them. But you can choose what comes next." His words stayed with me. Days later, I made my choice. I cut the last ties. I sold the remainder of my stake in the family assets, closed every account that linked me to them, and moved the money into my own ventures, projects that mattered, projects that would outlive the Clark name. I founded a scholarship fund for young women in tech, girls who reminded me of myself, desperate to be seen. I put my energy into building something new, something untainted by the rot of my family. And when Eric asked me to marry him on a quiet evening by the lake, I said yes. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing approval. I was choosing love freely, without fear, without begging. My parents didn't come to the wedding. Kendra didn't call. There were no flowers, no letters, no half-hearted gestures. And I realized that was the final gift they gave me, silence. Not the suffocating silence of my childhood, but the clean silence of freedom. Sometimes, late at night, I still think of the house in Evanston, the Christmas photos, the dinners where I sat invisible. I think of my mother's downcast eyes, my father's booming laugh, Kendra's smirk. And then I think of the woman I became because of all of it. Stronger. Sharper. Unafraid. The night I walked out of that steakhouse, humiliated and broken, I thought my story was ending. I thought I would forever be the unwanted daughter. But standing here now, I see it differently. That night wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because sometimes, you don't get the family you want. You build the life you deserve. And I built mine out of the ashes of theirs.